This is Learn from Others, where we interview a cross-section of successful individuals so you can learn from their experiences, achievements, and even their mistakes. We ask 4 questions that will educate and inspire. Greg Stanley will be your guide as we join our guest on a journey from adolescent daydreaming to success in today's world. Join us on this adventure as we learn from others together.
Welcome to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Kern. Kim, thank you for taking us on your career journey.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Well, before we find out what you're doing today, let's start at the very beginning. And please tell us, what did you want to be when you grew up?
That is a very interesting question, and it depends upon how far back we want to go. Well, my very, very first career aspiration, believe it or not, was to be a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader.
That's cool.
I saw a movie about the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, and I decided that was going to be the career for me. Granted, I was 12, I think, at the time. I did end up being a high school cheerleader, so that just goes to show you can do what you put your mind to. But my first, I would say, true career aspiration was to be an elementary school teacher.
Oh, that's cool. Did you have a teacher that really affected you that you said that would be really neat if I could have that effect on someone?
My 5th grade teacher. He was amazing.
Why was he so amazing, or what did he do that was so amazing? The way he engaged with kids, the field trips you took?
I think a lot of it had to do with the subject matter at the time. I am very, very fond of English and the English language and grammar, and that happened to be one of the subjects we were studying in 5th grade. But he was just a very down-to-earth, approachable teacher that made everyone feel important and as though they could contribute to whatever we were learning at the time.
Wow, that's a great gift for someone to have, whether they're a teacher or a manager. I've had some managers in the past that made you feel that way, which was awesome.
Yeah, it's very important. It's a great characteristic.
Well, I was going to ask what was your favorite subject or hobby in school, but I'm guessing the answer is English.
Yes, it is. All the folks around me would tell you that as well. My biggest pet peeve is probably ending a sentence in a preposition, and I will be the first to correct you if you do so in a nice way.
By all means, do that to me on this call, okay? Well, what was your first job, the one where you really felt like you had some responsibilities and wanted to perform?
My first true job was a camp counselor at my elementary school. When I was in high school, I was a summer camp counselor, and that sort of went along with the notion of wanting to be an elementary school teacher and played into that career path aspiration. So that was my first true job, but it was obviously seasonal. I only did that in the summers. My first real job out of college was serving as a receptionist at a hair salon.
That's interesting. So you got a little bit of that personal service aspect, interacting with customers on a daily basis. So
Absolutely.
You've told us a little bit about what you wanted to be when you grew up. So what do you actually do today? And if you would, walk us through kind of like your resume, including education and the different positions you had that led you to where you are today.
So I attended college at Vanderbilt University and was studying, as I mentioned, to be an elementary school teacher. Got partway through that process. Actually even did my practicum at an inner city school in Nashville, Tennessee, and quickly realized that perhaps being an elementary school teacher was not for me. It was somewhat of an overwhelming experience. It was a overwhelmed school, if you will, serving an underserved population, and the teacher-student ratio was not the best that it could be, and I saw a lot of children falling through the cracks, and it was just sort of a sad experience, honestly, and I had to come to terms with the fact that perhaps I was not the correct person to serve in that capacity. So I changed my major, was fortunate enough to not have to take additional classes to graduate on time. I was able to change my major to educational studies and human development. So I did manage to graduate on time and got sort of a sociological or psychological piece of the puzzle, if you will, in my education. Went on, as I mentioned, to my first job in a hair salon where really I learned a lot about work ethic and how you have to function in a work environment. And then my first job on what I would say was really my true career path was working with adults with disabilities as a job coach. And I did a little bit of everything. I bagged groceries at Kroger with them, and I made donuts at Dunkin' Donuts at 4:30 a.m. And it was a really rewarding experience in helping these individuals to find a way to feel as though they were contributing to the community. And it was a great experience, and it was my first foray into the nonprofit world. Although I will say, I think there is a lot to be said for you do what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a household where my mom was the executive director of a nonprofit for 26 years. So I spent most of my childhood handing out waters at events or stuffing envelopes for direct mail appeals on my snow days. And that obviously had a great impact on me because once I stepped into the nonprofit world in that first job at an organization called New Perceptions, I pretty much stayed in the nonprofit world throughout my career. I went from being a job coach for individuals with disabilities to being the adult services coordinator at the Stepping Stone Center, again working with adults with disabilities, and then moved on to be the special events director for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and eventually ended up being the executive director there. I spent some time as a major gifts officer for the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center and was the executive director, or they called it chapter president at the time, of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society.
Wow.
The one stint in the world where I was not in the nonprofit world, I went to work for Clear Channel Communications, and I was the only person in Cincinnati who actually worked for all three Clear Channel divisions. So at the time it was radio, television, and entertainment. They called me the Synergy Queen because it was my job to basically try to get all three divisions to play nicely together.
That's a very tough
And
job, I would imagine.
Well, it was a very tough job, and it was also very tough as they started to sell off their divisions. They sold entertainment, and then they sold television. I ended up staying with Local 12, working as Director of Market Development. But I learned a lot from that experience at Clear Channel. Namely, I kept gravitating back to projects that involved nonprofits, whether it be a sales opportunity that benefited a nonprofit or what we called a non-traditional media campaign. And I also learned that the for-profit world was not for me, that I really needed to do more than raise the revenue of a corporation. I needed to feel a sense of purpose. And that was actually when I made the switch to the Freedom Center and then moved on to the National MS Society after that. And coming here to the Children's Theater was honestly a dream come true. It is everything I love about the nonprofit world. And honestly, running one nonprofit is no different than running another. It's just a different product, if you will. But it's a happy place. The services that we provide in terms of being able to provide children with their first live theatrical experience or being able to fill the gap left by the reduction of arts education in schools, all of those services pieces are still purposeful, but it is such a wonderful and happy place to work.
So tell us exactly, what is your role at the Children's Theater?
So I am the managing director and CEO, and one of the things that I love about this organization, and honestly nonprofits in general, is there is no average day. You do something different on every day depending upon what the needs are. And something that I always say to people is don't ever ask anybody to do something that you yourself would not be willing to do. And that is certainly a philosophy that I live by, and it goes along with the change in day-to-day routine. So I might be handling payroll or doing the bank reconciliation one day and meeting with a sponsor the next, or unloading 40 buses at the Taft Theater for one of our school performances on another day. It really just depends upon what's happening at the time. So there really isn't a typical day.
It seems like a lot of jobs have a lot of variety, and that's one of the appeals to a lot of people. You're never bored because there's always a new challenge facing you every day, and it's not the same challenge. It's not with the same person or the same organization or the same sponsorship. So there's always something exciting and new to do every day. What does that end product look like? Are they always a play? Are there anything that you do off-site? Is it always in the same location? Is it evenings? Is it days?
A little bit of all of that. So we have our main stage performances that we hold at the Taft Theater downtown. We do 4 productions a year, and we have 10 school shows and 7 public shows for each of the productions. So obviously the school shows are during the weekday and the public shows are on the weekends. So it's about 64 performances, give or take. We might add a show here or there. That is our main stage. And those are Broadway quality, big productions. And the Taft Theater is an old Broadway touring house, 2,200 seat house. That's kind of an anomaly when it comes to children's theater models across the country. Most children's theaters tend to have 600 or 700 seat houses. I believe that we are the only children's theater in the country that consistently fills a 2,200 seat house with our main stage performances. But we have another division of the company that we call TCT on Tour, and we tour 5 to 7 productions annually, different productions than our main stage, and it's kind of theater in a box, if you will. Everything is designed from the sets, the costumes, even the sound system to fit into a van and hit the road and travel to schools, community centers, libraries. Truly a regional touring company. We've been to Maryland and Georgia and Illinois, but mostly around the greater Cincinnati area. And we see about 83,000 students a year through that division, where our main stage last year we had close to 103,000 patrons that came downtown to see one of those shows.
So you're interacting with about 200,000 kids annually.
Yes, we are. One misconception that we battle still to this day, although it's gotten significantly better, and I'm sure it has something to do with our name. People sometimes assume that we put kids on the stage. They don't realize that we are a professional theater company, and it's theater for children, not by children. That is something that we work to change that misperception as much as we can. Now, the one area of our company where we do put kids on the stage is our TCT Academy. That's the third division of our company, through which we offer performing arts instruction for kids ages 2 to 18. So we have drama, vocal, dance, stage makeup, improv, and different tracks that kids can take to increase their skill in that area.
So as a nonprofit, what is your overall goal? Is it the engagement with kids? Is it the opening their eyes up to this whole new world of entertainment and possibilities? What is the goal of your organization?
It is all of that. Our mission is to educate, entertain, and engage audiences of all ages through professional theatrical productions and arts education programming. So it's a little bit of everything that you just said. Obviously very mission focused. As a nonprofit, you always have to keep your thoughts on the notion that the mission is what comes first. It's not about making money. We do have a very healthy earned versus contributed income ratio of about 50%, which is exactly where you want to be. If we didn't have the product, we wouldn't have the contributed income. And if we didn't have the contributed income, we wouldn't have the product. So it's a well-balanced, well-oiled machine.
That's really amazing. And I am a little kid at heart. So I met your Clark Kent / Superman at Comic-Con, and he was fantastic.
He is wonderful. But we are very excited to launch that production.
So how does this job of yours align with your strengths and interests? Because it sounds like you have had an amazing career path. The different roles, and like you said, the nonprofit and the profit spell there for a little while, it seems like it just really has built upon each experience to get to you to where you are today. So how would you quantify your strengths and interests with this role?
I would say that what is a strength for me, honestly, could also be considered a weakness. I am not a horribly patient person, and those that know me well can attest to that. But that also drives me to be very change management focused. So I think my strength is coming into an organization that's at a true juncture of growth in its cycle and helping that process along to become bigger and better. Obviously, using the foundation that has been set before me, but to continue that growth. And that's something that I feel I've done fairly well through all of my various positions. And the Children's Theater is an example of that. We're a much different organization than we were even 3 years ago.
Well, before we move on to our next question, let's take a moment to hear from our sponsors.
Do you enjoy your job and find it fulfilling? Or do you spend more time wondering what if instead of what's next? If so, contact Career Spa. Career Spa has extensive programs and curriculum and understands the challenges faced by individuals in transition. They can teach these success practices to be mastered for an effective job search. Answer that what if question by contacting Career Spa and asking their experts, what's next? Contact Career Spa at careerspa.net. Talent acquisition is key to building a successful organization. Talent Connections is a professional services firm that specializes in recruiting, including executive search, contract recruiting, talent acquisition consulting, and recruitment process outsourcing. Whether you are an individual or a Fortune 100 company, Talent Connections can connect you with success. Contact them at talentconnections.net.
Welcome back. Well, we learned what you wanted to be when you grew up and what you actually do today. So if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently?
There are a couple of things that I think I would do differently. And what is that saying? Hindsight is always 20/20. I would slow down and enjoy the process a little bit more. You get very caught up in the moment and in growth and in change. And I think it's really important for you to pause and celebrate your successes, which is not something that I think I did very often. It was always what's next. So that is certainly something I would change. I think I would probably also continue my education and get my master's in public administration. I'm fortunate in that I had enough life experience and career experience to make me qualified for the position I'm in today. But I think having a little bit of additional education, and especially for anybody wanting to embark on such a role now, it's a different world. And I think having either an MBA or an MPA would be incredibly helpful.
And for our listeners, what's an MPA?
Masters of Public Administration.
Okay.
So sort of the MBA for the nonprofit world.
Okay. Well, speaking of which, let's make the assumption that someone would like to do what you do. What advice would you give them? Is there a typical career path? And you maybe look at it from a nonprofit perspective versus a children's theater perspective, just to make it a little bit more broad.
Yeah. I think the most important thing you can do if you're interested in a career in a nonprofit is volunteer. That is a way to gain experience and to get your foot in the door all at the same time. And if you end up volunteering for an organization that is something that interests you, you have that natural next step, whether it's just volunteering or whether it's actually participating as an intern for nonprofits. Most nonprofits have internships of some sort. That's a great way to gain that real world experience while you are getting that very important education, which obviously I would advise folks to do as well. And we talked a little bit about that, in terms of a master's in public administration or even your MBA. But you can do both concurrently and sort of move that process along a little bit quicker.
Okay. And did you have a mentor on your career path? And if so, how did they influence your career?
I would say I had a couple. One was the executive director when I was with New Perceptions, Sue Radabaugh. And when she actually moved to the Stepping Stone Center to take over as the executive director there, she took me with her. And that is how I ended up being the adult services coordinator there. And she was one of those leaders that was approachable, didn't believe in hierarchy, and really invested in her staff and in the professional development of her staff. I had the utmost respect for her. I learned a lot from her, and yet I felt I could relate to her as a person, not just as a superior, so that was very important. And she definitely influenced my pathway in the nonprofit world. I also worked with an individual who was with the Arthritis Foundation for a while. And again, back to something we were talking about before, I volunteered for the Arthritis Foundation back in my early 20s, working on various events and actually chairing an event for them. And their, at the time, events director, Judy Sturwald, really took me under her wing and helped me learn the business of the nonprofit world and took a chance with me, took a chance in allowing me to take on bigger roles within the organization, chairing events, et cetera, at age 22 or 23. You don't see that too often. I learned a lot from her and was very grateful for her willingness to work with me and take me under her wing.
Wow, that's very cool. Mentors can have such an impact, whether it's a formal or informal mentor, so that's great to hear your story. Well, are there any current projects you're working on that you would like to share?
We are, at the Children's Theater, launching a new program called the Theater Training Institute. It is actually up and running now, and it has 3 components. We are very, very fortunate in that Ken Jones, who was on our board for many, many years and was the founding director of the School of the Arts at Northern Kentucky University, had been dreaming about this project for years. And timing worked out, and at a point in time where he felt it was time to really take the next step in this project, he also realized that it matched with the Children's Theater's mission completely, and he's passionate about us as an organization and decided if he was going to do it, he might as well do it for us. Therefore, he stepped away from both the School of the Arts at NKU and from our board, obviously from a conflict of interest standpoint, to launch as director of this Theater Training Institute, this program for us. And again, years of thought and research went into this. It was not just a happenstance, hey, let's try this type of situation. There was a lot of preparation that went into it, mostly from Ken. And it has 3 components. And as far as we can tell from research, there is nothing close to the Theater Training Institute anywhere near us. I think the closest similar program is in Massachusetts. And the goal of the Theater Training Institute, in a nutshell, is to build upon training that exists for individuals at various ages and levels, but really teach them the business of theater. Too often you have kids that have just graduated from high school and they think that they can go straight to New York, or you have students that have just graduated from a conservatory or pseudo-conservatory style performing arts college who go to New York and fail because they don't know the business of theater. They don't know how to make their lives work in a city like Manhattan or even LA if you're talking the film industry. So the Theater Training Institute has really 3 programs. One is a comprehensive year-round program, and that is the piece that just launched, that is teaching adults the business of theater while they continue their training in all of the typical avenues: vocal, drama, dance, improv, you name it. But they're learning also how to be successful in the business. And it's a 1-year, 28-week, specifically on Saturdays, so that you can have another job. We realize that's important to make a living,
Right.
but to help these individuals be more successful when they do decide they want to take that next step. The other piece that we're about to launch to the Theater Training Institute is an application and audition prep seminar specifically designed for high school juniors or seniors and their parents. And this is something that was particularly appealing to me. I have a daughter who graduated from the School for Creative and Performing Arts last year, and the whole process of auditioning for a performing arts school was completely overwhelming. It was not at all the process I went through with my older daughter, the typical college application process. I didn't know what a unified was. I didn't know what a pre-screen was. I didn't know how many applications you should submit to performing arts schools, and that was me as a parent. She was even more overwhelmed. So this seminar is designed it's a 2, maybe sometimes 3-week seminar that will teach kids how to successfully audition for a performing arts school, whether that's selecting the right monologue, selecting the right music, how to command the attention of a room when you enter an audition, how do you take the appropriate headshot, and what should your performance resume look like. And concurrently, there will be sessions for parents to learn about things like unifieds and pre-screens and how many schools you should apply to, and all of those things that are completely overwhelming when you're talking about a very different process when you're applying for a performing arts college versus a more traditional liberal art environment. So we're really, really excited about that. I think we're filling a geographical gap in training, and I think we are positioning adolescents and adults to be more successful in the field in which they're passionate.
That does sound very practical and immediately applicable. So that's awesome. How would they find out more information on that?
There is a specific website. It is theaterti.com, and it's theater, R-E, theaterti.com. It is a division of the Children's Theater, but it does have its own specific website, and everything they might want to learn about it can be found there.
Okay, great. Well, as with most journeys, success largely depends on reliable transportation, and since I'm a huge car enthusiast, could you tell us, what was your first car?
My first car, and I have such fond memories of it, was a used Pontiac Sunbird.
Oh,
Right,
wow. Like an 84, 85?
I don't know what year it was, but I remember taking it to a dealer maybe a year after we got it for some reason, and I can't remember what it was, typical maintenance. And I remember the mechanic saying, "Was this car underwater?"
Oh, no.
Said, "I don't believe so." And he said, "Well, there are parts of this engine that are clean that shouldn't be clean." And we remember thinking, there is probably a history to this car that we're unaware of. But it was a wonderful car and had a better stereo system than most of my friends who had much nicer cars. So,
Well, that's a nice bonus there.
Yep.
Those are some of the words you never want to hear from your mechanic. Has this car ever been
was
underwater?
this car underwater? No, you don't want to hear that.
Well, what is your dream car if you have one?
I would have to say probably a Porsche.
I love
just
that.
think they're elegant and nice looking, but it would have to be an SUV because I do have children that I cart around still to this day. But I do. I have always liked.
I'm right there with you. I've always wanted one. Never had one. Always wanted one. So, well, one great perk to some jobs is a company car. So if I had all the money in the world, I'd love to buy you a cool company car. And this is a tough because I'm basing it on your position. I chose a 1951 Crosley hook and ladder fire truck. Now, hold on for a second because you probably think I'm crazy. So Crosleys were made in Cincinnati, so I got a Cincinnati connection there. They're classic. This particular one was made for kids, specifically for kids. It's a little bit smaller. What's fun, it was built and used by the very first amusement park in the United States called the Waltham Amusement Park. And so it entertained kids for 49 years until it closed down in 2000. 25 kids could ride on the back of this hook and ladder trailer around the amusement park.
Wow.
So it's not very practical.
You really are a car enthusiast.
There's only one of them. So it's not the most practical thing in the world, but I think it would be fun and somewhat aligned with your goals and engaging kids.
Absolutely. I think that is an excellent choice.
Well, thank you so much for taking us on your career journey. What's the best way our listeners can learn more about you or your company?
I would say probably our website, www.thechildrenstheater.com. All sorts of information there. We also have just launched our very own podcast called Audio Footlights. If listeners are interested in learning more about the Children's Theater, they could do so that way as well.
I love that name, Audio Floodlights.
Audio Footlights.
Well, cool. Well, thanks so much, Kim, for taking us on your career journey today.
Well, thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. Where will our next adventure take us? Subscribe to find out. If you know of someone who has a cool career story or occupation, contact Greg through Instagram at Greg Stanley LFO. That's GregStanley LFO. And we will see you soon as we learn from others together.